Good Monday, everybody, and welcome to Charting with Dan. I'm your host, Dan Murrell, and the show's going to be a little bit different today, but I hope you'll hang with me and I hope you'll stick around because I've got something a little special planned. Obviously, the big story, as it was last week, is Captain Marvel and its second week of release. So not only are we going to look at the weekend numbers, but I also noticed some things around YouTube, around Twitter, around the internet over the last week that I wanted to address directly on the show. And I thought it was a really unique opportunity because that's what this show is. It's about the numbers. And I started seeing some weird stuff being done with a lot of the numbers. So this isn't going to be the typical show. I don't have a co-host today. It's just going to be me and you for a little while, but I hope you like it. And I hope once we get to the end of it that maybe this will help out if you're a little confused or maybe you've heard some things about Captain Marvel. Maybe this video can help illuminate some of that. But first, let's look at the weekend box office. Captain Marvel was the #1 film for the second week in a row domestically, almost $68 million. The animated film Wonder Park was #2, followed by 5 Feet Apart. How to Train Your Dragon still in the top 5, as well as Tyler Perry's A Medea Family Funeral. Captain Marvel also the #1 film in the world with a total just under $200 million for its second weekend of release, $187 million. More Than Blue, which was largely driven by gross in China, came in second, followed by Wonder Park, How to Train Your Dragon, and Green Book, which is actually hanging in globally at #5, rounding out for worldwide. And then one question that a lot of people had regarding Captain Marvel before we do jump into the deep dive that I prepared for today is, how did Captain Marvel fare compared to other films in the MCU for its second weekend drop, at least domestically? So let's take a look at those numbers. Let's take a look at the lowest second week drop-offs for MCU films. Black Panther, obviously a phenomenal success, had the lowest second week drop-off of any film in the MCU, followed by Thor, the first Thor film, the first Iron Man film, Doctor Strange, The Avengers, Thor Ragnarok. Captain Marvel had the 10th lowest second week drop-off, but if you look, it's an almost identical drop-off to what Infinity War saw in its second week, to what Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 had in its second week, to what the first Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor Ragnarok. So the 10th lowest drop-off, but almost statistically tied with a lot of the other films in the MCU. So what we're looking at with Captain Marvel, last week it had the 7th best opening domestically for any film in the MCU. It is now, through 10 days, the 7th highest grossing film in the MCU. So a lot of the predictions that, for whatever reason, that there would be a huge drop-off in the second weekend, that it would start losing some of the ground that it got in its opening weekend, did not pan out or come to pass over this weekend. It's still holding pace about where it did. It's looking like it's heading toward a $400 million domestic total. It's over $750 million worldwide. It looks to be aiming toward $1 billion. We'll see how these next few weeks go. But the thing that I wanted to address today are some other things, some other numbers that I saw thrown around over the last week or so. And if you know this show, if you have ever watched me and my box office analysis and what I like to do, it's bringing perspective to the numbers, looking at the numbers, diving down deep. And there were just some things that I really felt like I wanted to say and I had to say, because I think that things should always be represented honestly. And sometimes numbers can work for a movie that you like, and sometimes numbers can work against a movie that you like, but the numbers are the numbers. And that's sort of what I wanted to spotlight today. So I wanted to play a little bit of fact or fiction regarding some of the things going around Captain Marvel. And the first one is one that I saw literally the day after last week's show regarding Captain Marvel's Monday performance last week. So this is a story that you may have seen all over the internet in the last week or so. Fact or fiction, Captain Marvel had a massive plunge on the Monday after it opened. So many YouTube videos, so many articles that I saw written talking about the fact that while Captain Marvel had an impressive opening weekend, although those numbers are also called into question, which we'll talk about here in a second, that people caught on, they wised up, and that Captain Marvel had a massive Monday drop-off. And when you look at the numbers, it looks like a big number. Let's look at the number that a lot of people saw, which is that's the Monday number on the 11th. It's 4th day of release. It dropped 71.7%, which was being portrayed as a massive plunge. And anytime you see that a movie drops 70% in one day, that certainly doesn't look great. However, you've got to put things in perspective. And the perspective of the fact is that a 70% drop off for a movie, particularly a movie that opens big, isn't that big of a deal. As a matter of fact, there's a lot of movies that have had a drop off like that from Sunday to Monday after their opening weekend. Venom was one of them. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was one of them. As a matter of fact, let's look at the Monday drop-offs just inside the MCU. These are the biggest, not the smallest, the biggest Monday drop-offs for Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Number 1, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, almost a 75% drop-off. Thor Ragnarok, 74%. Iron Man 3, Age of Ultron, Winter Soldier, Iron Man. There's Captain Marvel at 71.7, followed by Doctor Strange, Iron Man 2, Captain America Civil War. So yes, Captain Marvel did have one of the 10 biggest drop-offs on a Monday for the MCU. However, films that had bigger Monday drop-offs, films that were opened to more money, films that opened to less money, had similar drop-offs. To be honest, that's not such a big deal. The Monday drop-off was normal. It was what was expected. It's what you see all the time, not just for comic book movies, but for any movie that opens number 1. Yes, a lot fewer people go to the movies on Monday than they do on Sunday. That doesn't mean that a movie's in trouble. And that's really, this stat is the one that inspired me to go to the numbers to see what else was out there and to try to bring some perspective to it. Because when you make a big splashy banner or a thumbnail saying Captain Marvel dropped 70%, you're gonna get a lot of attention and you're gonna get a lot of clicks. And a lot of this coverage did. But the fact of the matter is they were covering a pretty standard, insubstantial event as if it were a huge negative for the movie. And whether they were doing that out of ignorance or just because they wanted to paint the movie in a bad light, I can't say. But what I want to do is look at some of the things like this and try to bring some perspective to it. So, fact or fiction, Captain Marvel had a massive Monday drop-off. I'm going to say that is fiction, unless you say that about every other movie just about that goes from a Sunday to a Monday. The next one that I saw a lot of coverage about was based on a quote that came out of a Deadline article. But the big splashy pull quote was that Captain Marvel needed to make $750 million worldwide just to break even. Now, why did people say that was a big deal? A lot of them said that a movie needing this much money to break even would motivate Disney, would motivate the fans, would motivate them to do any number of things to exaggerate how well it was doing, to alter the release strategy, to basically fraudulently pump up how well Captain Marvel was doing and how well it was received. So, did Captain Marvel need to reach $750 million to break even? Well, to answer that question, let's go back to the original quote that was used for everybody that I saw covering this for them to come to that conclusion. That quote came from this story that appeared in Deadline. That was a story that came out last week on Tuesday. It talked about it was the second best Tuesday gross in March for Captain Marvel. And there was one quote in particular that people pulled from, and it said, quote, "Domestic will be at $400 million. Captain Marvel will pass break-even in the theatrical window by the end of the week with $750 million worldwide." Now, that's the sentence that was pulled. Captain Marvel will pass break-even in the theatrical window with $750 million worldwide. Many people took that sentence to mean Captain Marvel had to make $750 million worldwide, when in actuality, and I think when you read that sentence and another one that I'm about to show you, what it meant was that by the end of the week, Captain Marvel will have passed $750 million and also broken even. That same sentiment was actually stated in a previous article that appeared in Deadline the day before that stated it a little more clearly. Let's take a look at that quote. That was from the Monday morning update. Captain Marvel will hit $750 million global plus, even if it's front-loaded, and pass break-even in its theatrical cycle based off combined net production and global marketing costs of $300 million. So that's what it's saying. By the end of its first week, it is going to pass $750 million and pass break-even in its theatrical cycle. It's not saying that it has to pass $750 million to break even. It's saying that both of those things are going to be achieved by the end of the week. And they were. Captain Marvel passed $750 million worldwide by the end of this past weekend. That's where it sits now. So the question is, what did Captain Marvel have to make to break even? Nobody knows the studio books. If you're going by just the conventional wisdom that you take home half of what you make domestically and a third of what you make worldwide, then the number could be between $650 million. It could be as high as $700 million. But I think the other thing that you have to look at is what that statement was saying, which is that it's passing break even in its theatrical run, meaning that the theatrical receipts, once it passes whatever amount, 657, let's say it is $750 million. Let's say that that's the number, which it just exceeded. That means that it's broken even right now just from theatrical receipts. And that's what it's saying. It's saying that forget the ancillaries, forget any other amount of income. It has passed the number required just from box office receipts to pay back its $300 million costs for global advertising and promotion and for the film's budget. I know it's a subtle difference, but people were drawing lines. People were saying that this was a sign that Disney was in trouble, when in fact it was a poorly worded sentence in an industry article that I think was blown out of proportion. And secondly, even if you want to take the sentiment of that correctly and say that Captain Marvel needed $750 million to break even, well, guess what? It did. So I don't really know what the problem is or why it was sensationalized to be such a groundbreaking statement. But I guess that's the world we live in sometimes. So, did Captain Marvel need to break $750 million to break even? I'm calling that fiction, and I also think that this was predicated completely on a misunderstanding and or a willing distortion of one sentence in one industry article that then spun off into at least a dozen videos that I saw on YouTube, plus who knows how many articles. I think it was overblown. Let's talk about the release strategy for the film. Now, this is another one that I saw, which is that Disney intentionally scheduled Captain Marvel to open globally in its opening weekend, a global release strategy, in order to make it seem like a bigger hit. So the theory goes thusly, that Disney, in an unusual move, decided to release Captain Marvel across the world, day and date, in every market, so that it would have a huge money-making, news-breaking opening weekend. Most people will add the caveat that they did it because it's not a very good movie. People would find out after the first weekend, which we found out now that there have been 2 weekends, is not true. It did not have a steeper than expected drop-off here in the United States. It had a large drop-off in China, but it's this drop-off that has been shared by many other comic book films and films in general. But let's go to the release strategy, which is that Disney released Captain Marvel day and date across the world in order to boost it and make it and make headlines as a huge worldwide hit. Again, this is nothing new. If you look at the top 10 worldwide releases ever, there are a lot of films in there that have been released day and date around the world. So let's do away with the concept, first of all, that a day and date release, meaning it opens in almost every major market in the world, is something that's unusual. That's not true. Just in the top 10 worldwide openings of all time, there are 3 films, not including Captain Marvel, that open day and date. Fate of the Furious, Jurassic World, and Batman v Superman. Captain Marvel opened higher than Batman v Superman and opened lower than both Fate of the Furious and Jurassic World. So, is a day-and-date global release something that's unusual for a big studio film? No, it's not. It happens all the time. Just in the top 10 biggest openings, there are 3 other films that have done it. Secondly, is it unusual for an MCU film to open in China on the same day that it opened in the United States? That's what a lot of people said, was that there's coordination to open it in China and in the United States on the same day because they wanted a big opening weekend. No, it's not unusual. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of Marvel films that have opened day and date in China and the United States. Some of those films include, let's take a look at that, JT, Thor Ragnarok, The Avengers, Doctor Strange. All of these films opened in China and the United States on the same day. It's not unprecedented for Marvel to open a movie in the 2 biggest movie markets on the same day. But I think what a lot of other people were asking is, why Captain Marvel? Why was Captain Marvel opened in so many major markets on the same day in the US when a lot of other Marvel films haven't been? They'll point to a lot of other Marvel movies saying like, well, Spider-Man Homecoming, Black Panther, these movies weren't opened in China, particularly on the same day. Why not? Well, that's because Disney doesn't dictate the release dates of their movies in all markets internationally, particularly in China. Spider-Man Homecoming was delayed in China because of a blackout period that China mandates during the summer. Ant-Man and the Wasp, also delayed in China because of a mandated blackout period during the summer. That movie did not release day and date because it's not up to Disney when China releases their movies. Black Panther was also not released day and date in China because of a Chinese holiday. Sorry, there was another image that was supposed to come up there that maybe didn't make it through. Is it in there, JT? No? Okay, that's fine. The bigger point being that this concept that a day and date global strategy is unusual is completely untrue. Now let's go back to the Disney strategy part, which is the idea that Captain Marvel was released everywhere around the world in order to make a big splash. And that Disney did this because it was a can't-fail strategy. Well, as a matter of fact, it's not a can't-fail strategy because Disney just failed with that strategy last year. Because another Disney movie that was released, also like Captain Marvel, day and date everywhere in the world, was Solo. Solo opened last May everywhere in the exact same markets that Captain Marvel did, except it wasn't a can't-fail. As a matter of fact, the news coverage surrounding Captain Marvel's opening was very negative because, surrounding Solo's opening was very negative because Solo didn't do that well in every market. So I don't agree with this idea, this conspiracy theory, whatever you want to call it, that Disney did something unprecedented by scheduling Captain Marvel to release everywhere in the world simultaneously, when in fact they've used that strategy before. It's failed for them before. They've opened MCU movies in China before. They've opened MCU movies in other times before because they couldn't open them in China. Disney's not in control of when all of their movies are released. Sometimes they get release dates everywhere around the world. Sometimes they don't. And yes, of course, if you're a big studio and you have an opportunity to schedule your film to open simultaneously in as many markets as possible, you're going to do it. It's easier logistically. It's easier to get publicity. It's easier to do the rounds. The day-and-date global release is not something new, and it's not something that only Captain Marvel has done. Plenty of films before it have done it. And so to paint Captain Marvel as a special case that's never been done before is quite frankly not true. So the idea that Disney had a global release scenario for Captain Marvel that was completely unprecedented, I'm calling that fiction, and I don't think that it was used to make it seem like a bigger hit, because other studios and Disney have done the same thing to different results. But there's one theory that when I tweeted about and asked what people wanted to know about, I got requested the most, and that really took me down the rabbit hole. And it's the most complex theory of them all. And that's the theory that Disney bought tickets to inflate the opening weekend of Captain Marvel. Let me just say up front, I don't have access to Disney's books and accounting records, but I do want to look at that information, who said it, where that information came from, and more than me telling you whether this is fact or fiction, this drills down to the heart of why I wanted to do this video, which is when you see a piece of information like this, I think it's important to look at where it's coming from and make the decision for yourself. So, Disney buying tickets to inflate the weekend box office of Captain Marvel. Almost everything that I saw referred back to one article, which had two accounts that purported to confirm that this had happened. This was an article that was in a blog called New Reports of Empty Theaters at Captain Marvel Add to Movies Controversy. I can't tell you how many videos when I was researching this I looked up that were covering this topic that went back to this one article to say these are the reports that we've seen, that this is the proof that Disney was buying tickets. This article had two accounts that it purported proved that Disney had, in fact, inflated Captain Marvel's opening weekend domestic release by buying tickets. The first was a tweet from a user who said that he or she, I suppose, had contacted a local theater and that there were 20 to 30 seats empty for each showing. This was embedded in the blog as an account from a user with information about this. The article then went on to write that they themselves had contacted a theater owner who, on the condition of anonymity, had said that there were 25 no-shows for every showing of Captain Marvel on Thursday through Saturday, that this is abnormal, that this had never happened before. And again, this one blog, this one article was used as the basis for videos with tens of thousands of views to push this narrative that Disney had bought the tickets for Captain Marvel. So let's dig down into that story and see where the truth may or may not lie. First, I wanted to give this the benefit of the doubt. I wanted to investigate it fully or analyze it fully and just say, okay, let's say everything in this article is true. Let's say that both the Twitter user and the writer of the article, that their confirmations were in fact correct, that 25 tickets for every screening of Captain Marvel were bought by somebody, perhaps Disney, and that money had gone toward the opening weekend of Captain Marvel. So I decided to do a little math. And I tried to give this theory the benefit of the doubt at every turn. I went with 25 tickets for every screening. I didn't just go Thursday, Friday, Saturday like the article said it was. I went Friday, Saturday, Sunday, many more screenings than you would get on just a Thursday night preview plus 2 full days. So I gave this theory the benefit of 3 full weekend days, 25 no-shows per screening at $10 a ticket, which is higher than the national average, times 4 screenings a day, or I think I might have even gone 5 screenings a day, times over 4,000 screens. So basically, I tried to test this theory to the max. This presupposes that not one theater in the United States was a complete sellout for Captain Marvel. That 25 tickets for every screening in every theater in this country were bought and paid for and were complete no-shows. Let's take a look at that math right now. 25 seats per screening, 5 screenings a day, $10 a ticket, times 4,310 days, times 3 days, would have been $16,162,500, or about just over 10% of Captain Marvel's opening weekend. That would have taken its opening from $153 million to $137 million, a number that was still well within its tracking. And I think it would have dropped from the 7th to the 9th highest opening MCU film. So even looking at those numbers, I think you have to ask yourself, and again, this is not me saying anyone's right or wrong. This is just asking yourself kind of a pure common sense question, which is that would Disney have spent $17 million to boost the box office of their movie by 10% while simultaneously running the risk and knowing that if they were caught red-handed, if somebody in the company leaked what they were doing, that this would be a disastrous PR nightmare for them, potentially fraudulent, to boost the opening by 10%. That doesn't seem like a very logical course of action to me. That doesn't seem like something that a company would do, but that's just my opinion. Like I said, I don't know the facts. I don't know what happened. But if you ask yourself the risk and the reward of a company like Disney, who's had plenty of financial disappointments, including Solo, including A Wrinkle in Time, Mary Poppins Returns was not a massive worldwide financial hit. Why would they pick one movie and none of the other films to do this? Wouldn't this just become standard practice? And if they did do this, why would they do it on such a small scale? I can't answer those questions, but what I can do is look at the information, look where it comes from, and ask those questions of the sources. So let's look at where this information came from. Now, the site where the blog was written, I can't confirm the person's report. It was an anonymous report. They said that they contacted the theater owner, who is also anonymous. I can't tell you whether they did or not. But what I can do is look at the source. And while this blog is not as out there as a lot of other news sources, I would question a little bit what their agenda would be, because a lot of their coverage of Captain Marvel the film, to me, has a bit of a slant. For example, once Captain Marvel was on the cover of Entertainment Weekly, they ran a story. They ran this story, which was Captain Marvel adopts divisive feminist slogan to promote Captain Marvel. Sorry, Marvel adopts divisive feminist slogan to promote Captain Marvel. Now, they're referring to The Future is Female, which is on the cover next to Brie Larson there. But again, I think that is a deceptive headline and a deceptive way to cover the story, considering that Disney does not own Entertainment Weekly. Entertainment Weekly, in fact, is owned by Warner, which would have a completely different studio. So to say that Marvel is adopting a feminist slogan to promote their film in that context is, to me, a bit sensationalist, and I think strikes me as a way to sort of rouse people up, to maybe draw a little interest, to perhaps put a bit of a spin on what was really just a magazine cover that was put together by a publication that has no official ties to Disney. The other source that this came from is the person on Twitter who claimed that they had spoken to a theater manager. And again, I don't know this person. I don't know what they did or didn't do, but all I can do is look at who they are and what else they've put out there in the world. And this person who claimed that knowing that if you claim that the Captain Marvel results are tainted in some way, that there's a fraud going on, that this is going to get traction and reflect poorly on the film, I think this might have been something that they were looking to do anyway, because this same person put a lot of other stuff out in the world. For example, they tweeted "Burn in Hell, Paul Feig" when talking about a new Ghostbusters remake. They called Brie Larson an intolerant, sexist, race-baiting Marxist. Does this seem like the kind of person who might be your go-to for non-biased facts, or does this seem like the kind of person who might put something out in the world that would make Captain Marvel look bad because they just don't like Captain Marvel that much? And I think this is an important question to ask anytime you see something critical, or particularly something that's alleging something like an empty theater or a fraudulent act on the part of Disney, saying that the facts are not the facts, but that in fact there's some conspiracy going on. Well, who are these people? And what else have they put out in this world? This is another tweet that I saw all over the place purporting to show an empty theater for Captain Marvel. I've seen this tweet on so many different videos and so many different blogs as proof that Captain Marvel was playing to an empty theater. It's a video of an empty theater that they say that it said that it was sold out online, but the movie just started and that it's empty. Okay, I wasn't in that theater. I can't prove that that's not where that person says they are. But I do think that the person that just a little while or in the same vicinity tweeted this, which is that at one point Captain Marvel is in the kitchen cleaning dishes, probably the most natural scene for the character. Something tells me that maybe that person isn't the person to go to for information you can trust about Captain Marvel. Something tells me that maybe they're not interested in seeing that movie succeed, that they have an audience, that they have a platform, and that by pushing this conspiracy theory, at best or at worst, they're going to put a question in people's minds as to whether it's successful or whether it's not. And I think that's what you have to do now. We're in a time in the internet where everyone has a voice and everyone has a platform, and that's a great thing. That has led to so much good in this world. But that also means that there's no accountability. There's nobody out there looking at what people are saying and saying, wait a minute, that's just not true. I can't verify that. And telling people, you know, hey, wait a second, maybe look at what this person's doing. No one can do that all the time. There cannot be somebody out there policing to make sure that what everybody says all the time is true. It's just an impossibility. That's a burden that you have to take on yourself. And there's other ways that you can do that. For example, there's a Business Insider article that I saw that was referenced again in several videos that purported to show proof that studios commit fraud at the box office. I saw this in several videos and several articles, and all of them were based off of this pull quote, which I'm going to present to you as it was presented in most of the videos. This pull quote that said, production companies and distributors aren't just being ripped off. Sometimes they're the ones over-reporting sales and even holding ghost screenings with no viewers. Producers and distributors want to pump up the numbers and drive awareness. They'll fraudulently report ticket sales, pump up the numbers buying cinema halls. You've got fraud going in both directions. That sounds bad. As a matter of fact, that was used as evidence to corroborate the fact that Disney could be behind all of this, could be defrauding people, could be spinning this web of lies. But that's not the whole story, because when you look at that quote in context, it doesn't have anything to do with Disney. As a matter of fact, it doesn't even have anything to do with the United States. That quote is from an article that ran in Business Insider about the box office reporting in China, saying that a lot of the Chinese box office reporting can be poor. And really the gist of it isn't even about studios. It's about theaters and distributors, theaters and people that are showing movies, exhibitors, underreporting how much films have made in order to pocket the money. So it's not even an article about studios fraudulently providing grosses to their own movies. It's about exhibitors underreporting how much movies are making, so that it seems like they're making less money. Which, when you carry this to its logical conclusion, a lot of people who want to say that Captain Marvel is making more money than it should be are pointing to an article in Business Insider saying that international grosses from China are being underreported and that movies might be doing better than they're being reported to be. This is what I mean when I say that you've got to focus on where these stories are coming from. You have to find context. It sucks sometimes, but you can't just take everything you hear at face value, which is what I try to do with this show. I try to provide context and perspective. Not everything that comes out of my mouth is always accurate. Sometimes I make mistakes. I made a mistake on last week's show, but I owned up to it. I put a pinned comment at the top of it. I explained what I did wrong. I explained how I made the mistake. It's tough to put this show together. Sometimes I'll overlook something. I'll get a fact wrong. I'll get a figure wrong. But I'm accountable to that. And I think that's the difference. A lot of times people want to just put information out into the world and they don't want to be accountable for it because they know that a large part of their audience isn't going to question them on it. And questioning something isn't cynical. A lot of times it's required. You have to make sure that the information you're getting is the truth. And I've seen so much distortion and lies and complete untruths floating around in the last week. And I'm not sticking up for Captain Marvel here. You can go look at my review. I didn't even recommend the movie. I thought it was okay, but I gave it a green splat on Rotten Tomatoes. I was right down the middle on it, listing negative. This isn't about sticking up for Captain Marvel. This is about sticking up for objective truth. And the fact of the matter is people can take a little thing, people can take something that you think can't be anything but a positive and spin it into a negative. One of the things that I saw going around about how Disney could have defrauded people out of tens of millions of dollars was attacking Brie Larson for supporting a charity, this GoFundMe, which was to send girls to see Captain Marvel. They were saying that Disney and Brie Larson and all the stars were pumping up the box office by supporting charities and that this charity money was fraudulent. Well, first of all, that charity raised $60,000. $60,000 in the context of a $153 million opening weekend. That doesn't even move the needle. But again, really? You're going to attack somebody for supporting a charity and saying that that money is not fraudulent, that that money shouldn't count? It just goes to show you that some people will take any piece of information and they will try to spin it into a negative. And it works. I've seen so many of these misperceptions repeated on the internet. One person will make a video, someone else will see that video and they'll make a video about it, or they'll write an article about it, and all of a sudden it's everywhere. And people take it as the truth because other people are telling you that it's the truth. But those people don't always have the truth at their heart. They don't always have the truth. It's not at the core of their interest. A lot of them just want to make a movie look bad or make a movie look good. I know this seems ranty, and I know this seems long-winded, and I'm sure that a lot of people are going to disagree with what I said in this video. But more importantly, what I want to say is that we live in a time where sensationalism clicks and sensationalism works. And a lot of videos that I referenced in this one have an audience of 5, 10, even more times the amount of audience that this video does, because fact versus fiction, let's take a sober look at the numbers. That's not sexy. It's not something that gets viewed a lot. It's not something that gets shared a lot. It's not something that hits the algorithm and shows up on people's recommended videos. No. But if you make a really big thumbnail about a huge plummet that in actuality isn't that big of a deal, you're going to get a lot of clicks and you're going to get a lot of views and it's going to get shared a lot of times and it's going to get seen a lot more because there's numbers and algorithms that tell people that that's what you should be watching. So there's something that I would like to ask people to do, and a lot of people are going to say this is really self-serving, and I promise you that it's not. However, there has to be a voice out there saying, wait a minute, this is not how it is. This is not the truth. So if you see somebody saying one of these things out there on the internet, if you see somebody taking a piece of data and spinning it to the other side, challenge them. Share this video with them. If you see somebody that's saying, oh, I heard Captain Marvel, it did terrible because it took a big plummet on its Monday, maybe ask them to watch this video, or you know what, take this information from this video and tell your friend that. This is not self-serving. This is not about promoting this show or this channel or me or Captain Marvel even. What this is about challenging the misperceptions that can so easily take over the narrative of a film. So here are some facts that I can tell you are definitely 100% true. When you look at the top movies of 2019, domestically, number one is Captain Marvel. It's made $264 million. It's performing, as I said, right now, 7th best among all MCU films. If you look at the box office worldwide, the #1 film of 2019 is Captain Marvel. It passed The Wandering Earth. It is now the #1 film, over $750 million, which some people would tell you was the break-even point for the film. I disagree, but even if it was, it passed it. It is now the #1 film of 2019. Those two things are facts. And there's a lot of other numbers that people can use to try to detract from that or spin the narrative away from that. But if you take anything away from this video, it would be please, 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 if somebody tells you something, including me, don't just take it at face value. Look into it. Look who's telling you. Look where they're coming from. Look what else they've said. And look where that data came from. And make up your own mind and confirm it for yourself. Thank you for watching this show today and every week. We'll be back next week with even more box office predictions and numbers. We'll see how Captain Marvel did in the 3rd week. I'll have a co-host. We'll have some more laughs, and it won't be quite as heavy as this, I promise. But I really do thank you for watching and sticking around. This was an episode that meant a lot to me to do. It was really just kind of therapeutic. So even if a lot of people don't watch it, I'm just glad I was able to get it out there in the world, and I hope it was useful to you too. We'll see you next week.